Welcome to our Cybersafe Digest Weekly Podcast, Episode 6. Each week, we will unfold the most recent cyber attacks and will provide you with valuable insights on how to shield your business from these threats, along with practical steps and tips to enhance your cybersecurity.
Welcome back to our Cybersafe Digest Weekly Podcast. Today we are here with our special guest whom we were invited to our Cybersafe event here on the 5th of December. First of all, I'd like to thank everyone that turned up for the event in person, and a big thank you to Charlie McMurdie, one of our stars of the event. We're going to interview Charlie today for a special episode of our Cybersafe podcast. Welcome, Charlie, and thank you for joining us today for the event and also for agreeing to speak on our podcast. Would you be able to give our listeners a bit of an overview as to who you are and a bit of your background, please?
Who am I and my background? So Charlie McMurdie, I joined law enforcement, Metropolitan Police, back in Life on Mars days, 1981. Many moons ago, served 32 years, dealing with all sorts of serious and organised crime. So from running murder investigations, working on the world famous flying squad, the guys who go after the armed robbers of, bank robbers and things, running the art and antiques unit, stolen vehicle unit, fraud squad, and then latter day setting up the national cybercrime capability for the UK to deal with cyber attacks that cause national impact, national harm. And then we went on to launch some of the regional cyber units where they work with academia and industry. Post-law enforcement, served my time and spent the money that government gave us to set up the national capability, most of which transcended into the National Crime Agency now. I then moved into PwC, PricewaterhouseCoopers, as their senior cybercrime advisor to help PwC build out its own capability as a line of service. And I spent some time there leading on the cybercrime aspect of breach aid, a multidisciplinary capability to work with clients, often to put the right defences, the cyber security and defences and training in place and raise awareness. But then, unfortunately, for clients, working with them when it all went horribly wrong, to help them mitigate harm and deal with cyber incidents as they happened. So lots of fun dealing with cyber and all the different facets of that, building out operational capability, staff training, industry partnerships, intelligence sharing, working with our financial sector. So, I've had lots of fun in the cyber arena.
A fantastic and varied career. So obviously thank you for everything you've set in motion, and we really appreciate you being with us today to talk to us and share some of your war stories and some of the really interesting insights you've picked up over that time. So touching on some of the topics that we've discussed today, I think your presentation, one of the things you mentioned was the 3 Ps, and we didn't really have the opportunity to delve into that too much, but I'd be fascinated to hear a little bit more around the 3 Ps and why they are important in defending of an organisation.
It makes me smile when I mention the 3 Ps, because law enforcement days we used to talk about the 3 Ps, but it was prisoners, property and prostitutes were the areas of risk. Now I talk about people, premises, process, products. It's an easy thing to think about, and how, you have to consider all these different aspects to build the right, as you alluded to earlier, the right wall of appropriate cybersecurity defences. It's not down to just, the lone actors, the techie team in the basement now. You have to look at all these different aspects to make sure that there's no gaps in your defences, and everybody's aware of their responsibility and what they should be doing and what they shouldn't be doing.
Yeah, I think one of the areas that often gets overlooked, and we didn't have the opportunity to touch on it too much in the event today, is that the importance of physical security. If we have on-premise workloads holding sensitive data, it's controlling who has access to those. And in the activities that you've been part of and that you can share, has the seizure of that kind of equipment been an important part of your activities?
Oh, we've had investigations or incidents where there's great training programs in place and they've got great security in place, and then the back door to the office is actually propped open with the fire extinguisher, as an example. So, physical security is certainly an aspect that has to be considered, who's got access, who's walking in, who's in that environment, but also people. I often say, I speak at quite a few events and conferences all over the place. I don't think, other than one example, you get members of the HR department turning up to these events. Mm-hmm. So, and HR are the people that are receiving all these emails with CVs and click on the link for, my credentials. So, weak links quite often are people within organisations that aren't even considered to be part of the cybersecurity defences.
I think that's really interesting, and kind of staying with the theme of people. Do you believe and have you seen insider threat being much of a problem, particularly in the smaller businesses? We know that enterprises, we see Hollywood movies, and I know they elaborate, but I guess some of our smaller customers, they always try to position how relevant are these threats to me, and is insider threat something that smaller businesses need to be concerned about, and have you seen it be a big thing for
yeah, so most definitely, and all different levels of insider threat, from targeted insiders gaining employment within organisations, but also within smaller organisations. Or I'll give you one example of construction sector. So construction sector, a lot of historic legacy systems, physical gadgets and machinery and things. Disgruntled employees who, are asked to leave. We had one recently where the systems admin was fired, but took all the data and left back doors on the system. We've had others where, we did some work looking at, people think they've worked at this organisation for the last 10, 20 years, building up their, client database, their reputation with their partners. If they're leaving that organisation, they feel as if they're entitled to take that data, those contacts, those, relationships with partners, and they'll uplift that data and off they go. So you could call that as, an insider threat. Mm-hmm. Certainly in my former sort of life, we did some work and we termed them the silver fox fraudsters, because it was noted that it was quite often, the older, more established individuals in companies that felt that they had that entitlement to take data and access with them. So yeah, insiders, and also individuals that, unwillingly are compromised for one reason or the other, or extortion demands coming. So, you get somebody to do something and then you've got them on a hook for a small thing. Then once they're on the hook, you can get them, blackmail them, make demands for them to do more criminality type activity. And
I guess identifying that people are in that position is hard. It must be very difficult. Is training really the only defence we have against that? Let people understand how they can compromise themselves, how they can make themselves a target for these kind of things?
Yeah, I think awareness for all members of staff, how what the risks are and what they should and shouldn't be doing. That's one aspect, but also you can look at the systems that are in place within the organisation as to what's the anomalies. Why is that person's login detail being used at 2:00 in the morning? Mm-hmm. That's one of the most common ways where you see things are happening that aren't correct, but also permissions across the network. Quite often, somebody will be in a company for a long period of time and they collect like tokens, these permissions.
Yeah, a badge of honour of all the places they've worked and things they've done. Yeah,
exactly. And again, that comes down to people should be doing a bit of housekeeping. Why is that person who's now working in that department still got permissions across these other areas?
Okay. No, I think that's definitely an area that people need to think about a little bit more. I think it's quite easy to see the technology side of solving this problem, but actually to solve for a lot of it, it's people as well.
Yeah.
So I guess a bit of advice from your experience. An organisation has a ransomware attack or is under some kind of other kind of DDoS attack or something like that. At what point should they be contacting law enforcement? Is it straight away? Should they ring somebody else first? What would the typical advice be? And what can law enforcement do, and how can they help them?
Typical advice, don't wait till you come under attack to contact law enforcement. Find out, get your plans, your preparation in place beforehand. Because as we know, anybody could come under attack now. Don't think that it will never happen to you. So be prepared is the key word of advice. There will always be somebody that you can get in touch with, say, look, this is the sort of business that we do, who should I be talking to, what do I need to, where's my emergency phone number that I need to call as and when something may happen. A lot of people think if you engage with law enforcement, they're going to come in with, big uniforms and big boots on and grab all your software and hardware and, march out with everything. That isn't the case. We now can work with industry. We can share intelligence rather than full-blown sort of investigation and prosecution type stuff. Intelligence is quite a key and useful aspect. Certainly if you go onto the National Crime Agency website, there's lots of advice around things that you should be looking at, points of contact, some of the regional centres. I would suggest get in touch with, identify where your local regional centre is and make contact with somebody there and, check out what can be done. But yeah, I think definitely don't wait till it happens. Be prepared beforehand. Reporting quite often with certainly with some of the bigger companies that we've come across, they will say, do we have to report this? Do we have to disclose this? When do we have to disclose this? What's the timeline? Obviously, if you're reporting to the Information Commissioner's Office, then they don't expect you to report it within the first, 5 minutes where you're scrambling and everything's under attack and demands are coming in left, right and centre. There is a window of opportunity, but they want to make sure that you are doing the right, the right behaviour, the right response, trying to mitigate harm and identify what's gone on and when it happened in order to give them an appropriate report. I've certainly come across cases where there's been quite significant attacks, and one of the big concerns from the board has been, well, I've got local law enforcement, I've got national law enforcement, I've got government, I've got Cabinet Office, I've got the National Crime Agency, I've got everybody wants to know what's happened when, and the confusion around who do I need to talk to, who do I have to talk to, who can help me. So get that ironed out first before you're left with lots of people banging on the door, want to know left, right and centre everything that's gone on.
It sounds like making contact with that regional law enforcement that's responsible for the specific area sounds like a really good place to start. Make that connection and take it from there, I guess. Yeah,
and it's not just making that connection for when you come under attack. It's most of these cyber centres now, and there's different types of law enforcement or business cyber centres. They're useful to engage with as a matter of course anyway, because you'll have like-minded individuals sharing intelligence as to what's happened to them or what they're currently seeing, what the threat picture looks like, what's most prevalent. So it's a useful forum to link up with, like today's event. Everybody sharing different aspects, and what about this, what about that. So it's a learning process, and sometimes time critical learning process where this current threat is emerging, and they'll hear it from their neighbours and be able to put mitigation in place.
Okay, no, I think that's excellent advice. So I think I would encourage everybody to find and reach out and make those contacts. I think that's a really good takeaway. So in your career, you've probably seen it, most of, if not it all. You've seen it all. You've done it all. You've been involved in so many different things as that particular industry has evolved, I guess. Do you have one takeaway, one thing that somebody can do today, both either on a personal basis or for their business, to try and improve their security, improve their resilience?
Yeah, I think so. Maybe it's different things for personal, but then if you're looking after and thinking about your own personal security and safety, then that's going to benefit the business anyway. So, simple things, about passwords, not using the same password. I smile because one of the cases way back when, the password that you use on your personal sites and information, make sure that's not the same as the password you use on your business organisation. There was a case some time ago where it was actually quite a famous case with a dating website for those that wanted to have some fun, and that database was breached. And you think, well, what's the harm in that? But it was quite useful for the bad guys because individuals using that dating website, their password may have been, I don't know, teddybear123 on the dating website. They were using teddybear123 and just changed the email, the access email, and use that in their business organisation. So just compromising the passwords and using them in the business environment from social to business presented an opportunity to the bad guys. So think about passwords, that's the same old. Think about what you're posting. That's the other thing that we haven't touched on. Who are you telling on social media that, you're not at home today, or this is where your kids go to school. All these bits of data that can be scooped up and used for leverage purposes or present a vulnerability to you. We had way back when, Google Earth with, routine old-fashioned burglars just using Google Earth for looking at access routes for breaking into houses. So wherever there is a technology opportunity, you can guarantee the bad guys will be exploiting it.
Fine, excellent advice. So listeners, use unique passwords. You should know this anyway, but it's a timely reminder. And be careful of what you share on social media. It can be used in ways that you couldn't possibly imagine.
Yeah, and the famous one as well, Wi-Fi networks. Watch what you're doing when you're out and about and jumping onto different Wi-Fi networks and you're posting different things and, where's that data going? So simple stuff.
Yeah, excellent. Brilliant bits of advice there, Charlie. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for attending today. To our listeners, remember you can get this through your favourite podcasting subscription. Make sure you pass the message on. Let us know if you like what you're hearing, if there's something you want to see, anything in particular of, you want us something to talk about something. And thank you again. We will see you next time.
Thank you, everyone. We've reached the end of episode 6 of our Cybersafe Digest Weekly Podcast. Thank you very much for listening. And to make sure you don't miss out on our future episodes, hit that subscribe button on Spotify, Apple, or Google Podcast. For more cybersecurity wisdom and resources, head over to our website at cybersafe.co.uk. See you next Thursday.